But what do you think the nature of your job really is?
I think the first and most important thing really is that it's not so much a job as a way of life.
Now, ma'am, a question of clothes and your clothes. How much time do you have to give to your clothes?
My clothes are not my priority. I enjoy bright colours, and my husband likes to see me look smart, presentable.
But I think it's, I like seeing a lady well dressed. And it was one of the things I always noticed about her before we got married was she had, I thought, a very good sense of style and design, which I appreciate, I notice.
Every day that we decide to step out of our homes, our identity in the world is both being constructed and dismantled simultaneously. Are we who we say we are, or are we who we strive to be? Or maybe we are what others identify us as. The features that make you, unfortunately have an ingrained status in the world that we live in. For example, if you have fairer skin, a lot of societies associate that immutable aspect of the self with purity, trustworthiness, and attraction. On the other hand, in the context of luxury heels, status is denoted by the privileged few who can slip their feet into brands such as Jimmy Choo, Louboutin, and Stuart Weitzman. For today's discussion, we're going to uncover how status touches so many aspects of both fashion and culture. If you're new here, my name is Drew. What it do? Let's talk culture. How has status developed during the modern era? My personal definition of status is what a particular individual's agreed upon rank is within a defined group. And with that definition, the first group of people that I think about as it relates to status in the world is that of the military. Every military system on Earth has clear and defined ranks, from the commander-in-chief all the way down to the newest recruits. The military rank system defines both authority and responsibility within its hierarchy. But when we talk about status within fashion or culture, the idea of status is propped up by something much different than that of the military rank system. I say this in a lot of my videos. The past informs the present. So in order to answer the question of how status has developed in the modern era, we must first peel back the layers of history and peer into its unending discernment. From the beginning of modern civilization, there are those that have and others that do not have. From the medieval monarchs of Europe to the distinguished dynasties of ancient China, every corner of the globe has established systems of a ruling class and a subordinate class. This includes the systems in place in the modern age. The ruling class in most societies are the dictators for defining what is high status within a particular time period within a particular society. For example, in 1886, when the automobile was first introduced to the world, the people who had access to these vehicles weren't the commoners or the factory workers. No. They were the ruling class. Taking it a step further and putting it in a modern context, the reason why English is the most dominant language in the world today is because of its status in global affairs. The countries who dominate militarily, economically, culturally, and politically are the world's ruling class. Now, of course, within each country, there is the state and then there is the citizens. And within the citizens, there's a ruling class and then there's a subordinate class. So there's a lot of nuances and layers to status in the world. And all of these elements of status and culture and geopolitics trickle down to us, the people living within the societies. On a macro level, we are left to choose between associations that strive either to display high status or to develop our own hierarchies within our own subcultural groups. Stay with me here. Status has been developed through thousands of years of tiny decisions made by human beings that have come before us. And more importantly, status has been developed by the ruling class of each generation that has come prior. During the 20th century, the predominant symbols of status for the United States included items such as tailored suits and dresses, job titles, particular car model, television size, and university degree. In the Netherlands today, a symbol of status because of the bike culture that's a part of that society is maybe having an electric bike versus having a regular pedal bike to get around the city on. In the Korean movie Parasite, which is one of my favorite movies that I've watched in recent years, it shows status in such a obvious way. The Kims, the main characters, the housemaids, the tutors of the movie lived below the street. They lived underneath the street, in the basement of the street, while the Parks lived up on a hill and lived beautifully and lived lavishly. One group had status and lived on the hilltop. The other group didn't have status and lived in the gutter. These symbols of status that we currently see in today's society and are exemplified in the past societies were developed by the ruling class. And in fashion, we consider those things to be timeless, to be things that come from the ruling class in their dominant era. To answer the original question of this section, status has developed in the modern age through those who possess the highest rank within society. And if you think that's not true, I would love to hear it down in the comments, but let's continue. If I've framed this properly, the argument that you should be making to what I'm saying is, well, Drew, what about subcultures? What about subcategories? What about niche communities? They defy this idea that status is only for those of the ruling class. Essentially, what we're talking about is how status is different from the micro society to the macro society. Every society in every country has what I'm coining as 1, the macro society, meaning the society at large, and 2, the micro societies, which are subcultural entities that develop as a result of being ostracized from the macro society. Examples of prominent micro societies within the music industry include East and West Coast hip hop, K-pop, Chicago-style jazz, electronic dance music, punk rock, and the list goes on and on and on. Bringing it back to fashion, the macro society focuses most of its attention on retailers such as Zara, H&M, Uniqlo, The Gap, and Calvin Klein. While micro societies, aka the niche communities that decide to venture a little bit further down the fashion iceberg, focus on lesser known brands and designers. I think we can all recognize these micro societies within fashion exist. There are so many brands, so many designers that are a part of so many countries in so many different regions that we just can't know about because we live in South Korea, or we live in the United States, or we live in Mexico, or we live in Argentina, or Brazil, or we live in Germany. And that's one of the most interesting things about fashion and culture, is that every region develops its own flavor of its own micro society. But why do these micro societies develop in the first place? Ostracization is definitely one reason why these micro societies develop. And if you don't know what ostracization means or ostracizing means, I'll define it for you really quick here. Ostracize, a verb, exclude someone from a society or group. I don't know which dictionary this is, but it's on my phone. Bada bing, bada boom. You now know what ostracize means. Other reasons include differentiation of ideals, rebellion from the macro, and a desire to identify oneself. Minority groups, whether by ethnicity or by socioeconomic status or gender or creed, tend to develop their own vernacular, style, and culture. One of the most interesting micro societies to develop is that of sneakerheads and the sneaker community. I think a lot of people get introduced to fashion through this pipeline. You first get into sneakers and then you start to want to look better with your sneakers, so you have to find clothes that associate with your sneakers, and then it kind of continues to snowball until you're buying Rick Owens $5,000 puffer jackets. I hope not. And at the beginning, if it wasn't Jordan 1s, it was foam posits. If it wasn't foams, it was Yeezys. And if it's not Yeezys, then maybe it's currently New Balance. These brands exemplify a world that my 90-year-old grandpa knows nothing about. They are truly a micro society within the macro society. The thing that's interesting about micro societies and subcultures is how status develops within these niche communities as well. For example, from the outside world, from the macro society, most people would think that there is no status or hierarchy within the sneaker community. But there is. There is a quote unquote coolest sneakerhead or a sneakerhead with the best collection, and for whatever reason, as this group has developed, there is a certain status indicator for having particular shoe models in your sneaker collection. The hierarchy kind of develops like this, in my opinion. Maybe you're lucky and your first pickup in the sneaker community is a rare pair of Jordans, but you can't just have one rare pair of Jordans to be considered high status within a sneakerhead's mind. Maybe you acquire 9 more sneakers that are equally as hot as that rare pair of Jordans, but for some it still won't be enough. You might need to get 20, 50, 100 pairs of sneakers. And what I've found is that we revere, not we, but those in the sneaker community revere those with the most outlandish, the largest, and the best sneaker collections. Or the person or the people with high status within the sneaker community are those who have the most information, can tell you the most history, or have the most context to story on that particular sneaker. And you can't forget having player exclusives or samples in your collection. All of these things are small indicators to other people within the sneakerhead community, within the micro society, that you are of high status within that community. The lines of status really become clear when you see that young kids or younger people or beginner sneakerheads look up to particular individuals as examples, and they kind of cast themselves in the category as the new recruit into the sneaker game. Some of the quote-unquote commanders-in-chief within the sneaker community include celebrities such as DJ Khaled, Tyga, and Lil Yachty. Man, I love this conversation. The thing about status is that it isn't static, meaning what is high status now won't always be what is high status in the future. It changes over time. I'm paraphrasing a bit, but in W. David Mark's new book, Status and Culture, one of the reasons that status shifts over a course of a generation or 2 generations or 3 is due to the fact that particular symbols or artifacts within a hierarchy begin to develop brand new meanings in other hierarchical micro societies. Take the example of the automobile again. That originally came out in 1886. It was a symbol for those in the ruling class. A high status individual would own an automobile in the early 1900s. Fast forward to 2006, car ownership was and currently is at its highest rate in the modern world. I say this to illustrate that status changes over time. And in fashion, this also rings true. If you like sneakers, then tell me what the sneaker of the year was according to Complex in 2015. If you don't know, I'll let you know in a second. It was the Adidas Ultra Boost. You'd be hard pressed to find 10 people that would say that the Adidas Ultra Boost is still the #1 sneaker in 2023. When something is deemed the best or has a high level of quality, it brings with it a certain level of cachet if it's worn or if it's a symbol. That cachet is understood by the people within that particular group until a new form of cachet or a new form of symbol or item develops and supersedes that original item's cachet, trumping it and becoming the dominant expression of status for that particular group. And this is how trends work in fashion. Every 6 months or 3 months or sometimes even week, new trends emerge. And for those who want to be in trend, who really care about being ahead of the curve, the new trend denotes status and attention for that particular item or genre or piece of clothing. Those things that we call timeless embody tradition and represent a collective agreement in which a particular former ruling class is the ruling class. For example, we all agree that a 2-piece suit and a silk dress are timeless items of clothing. And if you don't agree, let me finish the example and we'll get back to that. For the two-piece suit, these styles began to develop around the 18th century. I actually wanted to clarify the messaging for this section. When it comes to two-piece suits, it is true that yes, the development of the modern suiting system started around the mid to late 1800s. And then when it comes to silk and silk dresses, silk is an ancient fabric, so it's been used for a long time. But the contemporary versions of silk dresses for women's wear is a relatively quote-unquote new development. And that's all I'm trying to say. I don't really say it properly in the actual when I first did it, when I was recording at my desk, but Editing Drew is here to save the day. Let's continue. The reason why I want to highlight these time periods, 18th century or 20th century, we call the things that are timeless things that have only been around for a little over 200 years. That's it, 200 years. No more, no less. These things have only been around for a handful of generations. And if you want to peel back the onion a bit more, like I said before, you could argue that two-piece suits and silk dresses are only timeless to a particular society within a particular region of the world. And the reason why other societies in the world can say that, yeah, a two-piece suit is timeless, they can say that in parts of East Asia or Africa, is because, like I mentioned before, economics, geopolitics, power, culture, the countries that are considered the ruling class for the world have essentially forced other nations or convinced other nations that this is what timelessness, this is what class, this is what high status looks like. And they did that through a plethora of ways that include colonization, war, cultural innovation, and so many other factors. All this to reiterate, status evolves and fashion evolves. And what we call high status today, in 200 years, I guarantee you, it'll look and feel a bit different. The last thing I want to touch on for this video is how status actually affects fashion and its various subcultural communities. I personally think that status has a negative role or plays a negative role in how it affects us as fans of fashion and culture. Trends, for example, are constantly churning in new items and convincing you that what you have currently isn't enough and that you should go out and buy what's new, what's hot, and participate in that cycle. Timelessness is a construct, in my opinion, and all of the trendy versus timelessness videos that I've made are incredibly fun, but are only valid in the context of modernism. And hierarchical systems within art and fashion and culture seem to just have negative effects. If a particular item is put on a pedestal, which a lot of items are, and that inadequacy that we feel for not having that item, I think is mentally draining and just is overall negative. Status is also this moving target. So no matter if you acquire something that is of a particular high status, in the matter of 6 months, 3 months, or a week, it could be obsolete in the eyes of the community because there's something new that has everyone's attention. And some of you are probably already arguing against this point and thinking, well, on the other side of the coin, there are some things within fashion that we should value, like the quality of a garment, if it's ethically made, how it was dyed, was its production ethical, and all of these factors that surround the production of the clothing we make. Does it destroy an aspect of someone else's life to create something beautiful? All of these things should be factored, not should, but rather are being considered when someone decides to purchase something. Ethics is an interesting argument against the negativity that status plays within fashion. But the reason why I mentioned that the macro society pays most of its attention to retailers such as Zara, H&M, Uniqlo, The Gap, and Calvin Klein is because those companies rake in billions of dollars of sales every single year, and it's only increased. So for the majority of people, the majority don't really care about the ethics or the quality of some of these pieces if they are associated with some of these fast fashion companies that don't produce things at the same level as some of the more refined niche community micro society brands. Now, before you get upset with me again, I do think that yes, quality is a subjective thing sometimes. But I think that for the most part, most people can agree that things made by fast fashion or made in today's society are of a less or a lower quality grade than those things that were made in a previous era. I'm not saying that just because you shop at Zara or Uniqlo or The Gap that you disregard ethics in other areas either. It's such a nuanced topic, right? And there is no kind of right or wrong answer. That's why I love making these videos. What are some of your thoughts about status? Does it play a role in your purchasing decisions? Maybe subconsciously, or if you're now conscious of it, are there items that you've bought that you think are high status items? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, I'm spreading peace, love, and positivity in 2023. So that means I'm spreading peace, love, and positivity to you from me. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful rest of your day. Abianto. Peace. Yo, what is good? Post vid. Here's a fist bump for the one time, man. Bop! Thanks so much for staying to the end of the video. The post vid, if you don't know, if you're new here, this is the part of the video where we just get to hang out. I get to talk about something random or something that's been on my mind, and then if you guys want to respond to me, you answer back #PVV. So for today's post vid question of the day, we have a traveling question. What is one country that you've always wanted to visit? Like, not city, not state, country that you've always wanted to visit. I guess it can be a city within another country. For me, I've always wanted to go to Lithuania. Lithuania is a place that I've heard has, not heard, but I know they have great basketball. Like, I love basketball. Like, I've always loved basketball. So it would be interesting to go there. And I've heard it's a beautiful place. Vilnius, I believe, is the capital city. So if there's any Lithuanians out there who recommend anything, I'm definitely gonna try to make a trip out to Lithuania. Let me know your countries or your cities that you'd want to visit down in the comments. #PVV. Love y'all, man. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.